I don't need some outside attorney telling me how to run my courtroom." The words cracked through courtroom 3 like a gavel strike. Judge Garnet Ashworth leaned forward on the bench, his face flushed the color of old brick, veins visible at his temples. 31 years on this bench had taught him one thing: control. And control was slipping. The man at the defense table didn't flinch. Solomon Vance stood with his hands resting on a yellow legal pad, pen aligned precisely with its edge. His suit was charcoal gray, modest, the kind a small firm attorney might wear to project competence without threatening anyone's ego. Behind him, his client, Caleb Dunmore, 34, black mechanic, wearing an orange jumpsuit and metal cuffs, sat rigid with fear. The judge had just made his first mistake. He didn't know it yet, but the man he was threatening wasn't a solo practitioner from Atlanta taking a pro bono case. He was an associate justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, and every word spoken in this courtroom was being documented for a formal judicial misconduct investigation that had been building for 18 months. Solomon picked up a document from the defense table. His voice carried no emotion when he spoke. "Your Honor, I'm reading from the official arrest report, case number 24-07-19. He paused. Let the case number settle into the court record. Quote, "Subject was observed operating a vehicle matching description of stolen property." End quote. He set the arrest report down, picked up another document. "The vehicle registration, which I have here, certified copy from the Georgia Department of Revenue, shows my client purchased this truck on February 3, 2019. Title transferred. Lien released. 5 years of continuous ownership." The gallery stirred. 47 people in wooden pews, most of them black, most of them from First Baptist Church of Braxton. They'd filled every public seat at Pastor Silas Yates's request. They were watching. Judge Ashworth's gavel came down hard. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence. The officers had probable cause based on a matching vehicle description. The description in the 911 call specified a white pickup truck. My client drives a black pickup truck." Silence. The ADA, Cassian Merrill, mid-40s, crisp suit, the kind of prosecutor who'd never lost a case in this county, shifted in his seat. His pen moved across his notepad. 2 quick words, underlined. "The court," Judge Ashworth said slowly, "will take a 15-minute recess." His gavel fell. He rose. The bailiff near the defense table, Brick Harmon, ex-military, 240 pounds of controlled aggression, stepped closer to Solomon, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Careful, counselor." The words were barely audible. "This county has a long memory." Solomon wrote on his legal pad, "Badge number 4471, date, time, exact words." Then he looked up at the bailiff and said nothing at all. If you're watching a man stand alone against a system designed to break him, hit subscribe, because what happens next in this courtroom will test everything he believes about justice. 3 days earlier, Solomon Vance had checked into the Pinewood Motor Lodge on the outskirts of Braxton, Georgia. Population 4,200, county seat of Mercer County. 1 superior court, 1 chief judge, 1 set of rules that everyone understood but no one spoke aloud. The room cost $63 a night. He paid cash, signed the register with his own name, no need for aliases when the cover was simply being underestimated. He unpacked methodically, suits arranged by color, charcoal, navy, black. Legal pads stacked in groups of 3. Pens, blue ink only, lined parallel on the desk beside a digital voice recorder small enough to clip to a belt. The habits of someone accustomed to order, to precision, to environments where small details determined large outcomes. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message from a blocked number. Arrived safely. Beginning observation phase. Will report weekly unless circumstances require acceleration. He typed the response, sent it through the secure channel, then deleted the conversation. The message had gone to Hazel Odom, JQC staff investigator. She'd been building the Mercer County file for 6 months before Solomon volunteered to go undercover. 43 complaints against Judge Garnet Ashworth. 8 different attorneys, 6 years. All dismissed or pending review. The system protecting its own. Until the Judicial Qualifications Commission decided that observation from a distance wasn't enough, that someone needed to stand in that courtroom and document the pattern firsthand, that someone needed to be targeted the way those 8 attorneys had been targeted, and survive it with evidence intact. Solomon had volunteered because his sister hadn't survived. Not the wrongful conviction that took 3 years of her life, not the exoneration that came too late to matter, not the slow erosion of everything she'd believed about fairness and law and the possibility that the system could be trusted. She'd died 6 years ago, 51 years old. Heart attack, the doctors said. But Solomon knew better. The system had killed her one disappointment at a time. He pulled the framed photograph from his suitcase, placed it on the nightstand. Her face smiled up at him, frozen in time at 23, before everything went wrong. "I'm going to make it right," he said quietly. "I promise." The room's air conditioning hummed. Outside, cicadas screamed their summer chorus. Solomon opened his first legal pad to a fresh page and wrote, "Day 1, Mercer County, beginning." The Mercer County Courthouse stood at the center of Braxton's town square, a 3-story brick building with white columns and a Confederate monument out front that no one had gotten around to removing. The metal detector at the entrance was staffed by 2 bailiffs, Brick Harmon and a younger deputy named Archer Phelps. Solomon arrived at 8:47 a.m. His briefcase contained case files, legal pads, 3 blue pens, and a recording device disguised as a phone holster. He placed the briefcase on the conveyor belt and stepped through the metal detector. Clean beep. He reached for his briefcase. Brick Harmon's hand got there first. "Hold up, counselor. Random additional screening." Solomon's expression didn't change. "I wasn't flagged by the detector. New policy. All out-of-county attorneys get secondary screening. Arms up." The pat-down was aggressive, hands pressing harder than necessary along his sides, his legs, his back. Other attorneys, white faces, familiar faces, passed through with cursory waves and nods from Brick. "What's your business here?" Brick asked, hands still moving. "Dunmore case. Preliminary hearing." "Dunmore." Brick's laugh was short, harsh. "That the car thief?" "That's for the court to decide." Brick stepped back. His eyes moved over Solomon's face with the slow assessment of a man deciding whether someone was worth the trouble. "You can go, for now." Solomon collected his briefcase, noted the time, 8:53. 6 minutes for a screening that should have taken 30 seconds. He wrote it in his legal pad as he walked toward the elevator. Behind him, Brick Harmon picked up his phone and made a call. "Chaco." The clerk of court's office smelled like old paper and industrial cleaner. Ivory Prescott sat behind the counter, a white woman in her early 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Help you?" "Solomon Vance, attorney for Caleb Dunmore. I need to review the case file." Ivory's smile flickered. She typed something into her computer, then frowned at the screen. Dunmore, let me check." More typing. A theatrical sigh. "Seems that file's been pulled for review. Judge Ashworth has it in chambers." "The preliminary hearing is in 3 days." "I understand. But when the judge requests a file, the judge gets the file." She shrugged, the gesture of someone who'd learned that helplessness could be a weapon. "Come back tomorrow. Maybe it'll be released by then." Solomon wrote in his legal pad, "Document access denied. Prescott, I date. Time, stated reason." Ivory watched him write. Her smile faltered. "Something wrong?" she asked. "Just keeping records." He capped his pen. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked toward the door. In the reflection of the glass panel, he saw Ivory reach for her phone before he'd taken 3 steps. The Mercer County Jail sat on the edge of town, a low concrete building surrounded by chain link and razor wire. Solomon signed in at the front desk, submitted to another search, this one by the book, no commentary, and waited in interview room C for his client. Caleb Dunmore entered in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed in front. He was 34 years old, lean from years of manual labor, with the exhausted eyes of a man who'd stopped expecting good news. "Mr. Vance?" "That's right. Please, sit." They faced each other across a metal table bolted to the floor. Solomon opened his legal pad to a fresh page. "Tell me what happened, from the beginning." Caleb's story came out in fragments. He'd been driving home from his shop, Dunmore's Auto Repair, 12 years in business, clean books, good reputation, when the blue lights appeared in his mirror. 2 patrol cars, 4 officers, guns drawn before he'd fully stopped. "They pulled me out through the window." Caleb's voice was flat, recounting trauma as fact. "Face down on the asphalt, knee on my back. Told me I was under arrest for grand theft auto." "What did you say?" "I said it was my truck, showed them my license. The registration was in the glove box. They didn't look." Solomon wrote steadily. "Did any of the officers say anything specific? Anything you remember clearly?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "The bailiff, Harmon. He was there that night. Off duty, I think, but he showed up. He said something when they cuffed me." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Should have known better than to drive something that nice.'" The pen stopped. Solomon looked up, meeting Caleb's eyes. "You're sure those were his words?" "I'm sure. I'll never forget them." Solomon wrote the quote exactly, underlined it twice. "Mr. Dunmore, I want you to understand something. This case isn't just about getting you released. It's about documenting a pattern of behavior that affects every person who walks into that courthouse." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean that what happened to you has happened before, to other people, and unless someone stands up and says enough, it's going to keep happening." A long pause. Then Caleb nodded slowly. "You're not just a lawyer, are you?" Solomon's face remained neutral. "I'm the lawyer standing between you and a felony conviction. Right now, that's all that matters." The Wagon Wheel Diner sat 2 blocks from the courthouse, a chrome and vinyl relic of a different era. Solomon took a booth near the window, ordered coffee and a grilled cheese, and opened his laptop to review the case files Hazel had sent through the secure channel. 43 complaints. He scrolled through them one by one. Attorney Marcus Webb, April 2019. Recusal motion denied without hearing. Case file held in chambers for 17 days prior to trial. Attorney Denise Patterson, October 2020. Sanctions imposed for frivolous motion to suppress. Motion later upheld on appeal. Attorney James Odell, March 2022. Security screening extended to 45 minutes on day of closing argument. Missed scheduled court time. Case dismissed with prejudice. The pattern was clear. Black attorneys, legitimate motions, systematic obstruction. And always, the complaints went nowhere. 2 deputies at the counter glanced his way. Their conversation dropped to whispers. One pulled out a phone, typed something, looked at Solomon again. He finished his sandwich, left cash on the table, walked out without making eye contact. The message was clear. Outsiders were watched. Outsiders were remembered. Outsiders who asked the wrong questions found that doors closed before they could knock. Solomon drove back to the Pinewood Motor Lodge, checked the perimeter of his room, swept for listening devices, a habit from years of cautious practice, and sat down at the desk with his legal pad. Day 1 complete. Obstruction confirmed at clerk level. Physical intimidation documented at security. Pattern consistent with JQC complaint file. Will proceed to preliminary hearing and observe judicial conduct firsthand. He looked at his sister's photograph. "Still with me?" Her smile, frozen in time, offered no answer. Day 2 brought more of the same. Extended security screening, files still unavailable. polite stonewalling from every office he visited. But day 2 also brought Priscilla Waller. She found him in the courthouse cafeteria, a cramped room in the basement that smelled like overcooked vegetables and disappointment. He was reviewing notes when a woman in her mid-50s approached his table. Tired eyes, practical suit, stack of files under one arm. "You're the Atlanta attorney. Dunmore case." He looked up. "I am." Priscilla Waller, public defender. She didn't wait for an invitation, just pulled out the chair across from him and sat. "Heard about your screening this morning, 38 minutes. 37. I timed it." Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I've got 17 cases in front of Ashworth right now, 16 black defendants. You want to guess how many are getting plea offers worse than comparable white defendants? All of them. All of them." She slid a folder across the table. "I've been documenting this for 3 years. Filed 2 complaints with JQC. Nothing happened." Solomon opened the folder. Handwritten notes, case numbers, sentence comparisons, data points stretching back to 2021. "May I keep this?" "They're copies. Originals are in a safe deposit box in Atlanta." She paused, just in case. He looked at her. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion of fighting alone, the quiet determination that persisted despite evidence. He recognized both because he'd seen them in his own mirror every morning for 12 years. "Thank you for sharing this. Thank me if something actually changes." She stood, gathered her things. "Good luck with your hearing, Mr. Vance. You're going to need it." She walked away. Solomon wrote her name in his legal pad, underlined it. The preliminary hearing began at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning that already felt like August. Heat shimmering off the courthouse parking lot even at 8:30. Solomon arrived early. Passed through security. 41 minutes this time, a new record. Found courtroom 3 and took his seat at the defense table. Caleb Dunmore was brought in at 8:55, wrists cuffed, escorted by Brick Harmon. The bailiff positioned Caleb in the chair beside Solomon and leaned down close. "Your lawyer thinks he's smart. Smart doesn't mean safe." Solomon heard, said nothing, wrote. The courtroom filled. Pastor Silas Yates led a contingent of 37 church members into the gallery, filling the public seating section. Their presence was quiet but deliberate, witnesses to whatever happened next. At 9 a.m. precisely, Judge Garnet Ashworth entered from chambers. Everyone rose. He took his seat on the bench, shuffled papers, and surveyed the courtroom with the proprietary gaze of a man who owned everything his eyes touched. "Court is in session. Case number 24-07-19, State of Georgia versus Caleb Dunmore. Charges, grand theft auto, resisting arrest. Is the defendant present?" Solomon stood. "He is, Your Honor. Defense counsel Solomon Vance, appearing on behalf of Mr. Dunmore." The judge's eyes moved over Solomon's face. Something flickered there. Recognition not of the man but of the type. Outside attorney. Problem. "Mr. Vance, before we proceed, the court notes that pro hac vice motions for out-of-county attorneys require 48 hours advance filing." Solomon didn't hesitate. "Your Honor, Georgia Uniform Superior Court Rule 4.4 requires pro hac vice admission only for out-of-state attorneys. I'm licensed in Georgia, admitted to this bar for 22 years. Silence. The correction landed publicly, in front of the gallery, in front of the court reporter whose fingers never stopped moving. Judge Ashworth's jaw tightened. "Noted. Proceed." Ada Cassian Merrill rose for the prosecution. His presentation was smooth, practiced, the kind of argument that wins cases through confidence rather than evidence. "Your Honor, the state's position is straightforward. On April 3rd of this year, officers responded to a 911 call reporting a suspicious vehicle matching the description of a truck stolen earlier that day. The defendant was observed operating said vehicle and was detained pending verification. When ownership could not be confirmed at the scene, the defendant was placed under arrest." Solomon stood. "Your Honor, may I respond?" A wave of the hand, of dismissive. "Briefly, the 911 call, which I have a transcript of here, described a white pickup truck. My client's vehicle is black. The call specified a license plate beginning with BRK. My client's plate begins with DNM. At no point did the so-called matching description actually match. Murmurs from the gallery. Judge Ashworth's gavel came down. Order. Mr. Vance, the officers acted on probable cause based on information available at the time. Your Honor, I'd like to submit the 911 transcript into evidence. Defense Exhibit A. He held up the document. Cassian Merrill rose quickly. Objection. Lack of foundation. The transcript is a certified copy from Mercer County Emergency Services. I have the certification seal and the signature of the record's custodian. The judge hesitated. Denying a certified document would create grounds for appeal. Accepting it would undermine the prosecution's narrative. I'll allow it, for now. Solomon handed the document to the court clerk, returned to his table, wrote in his legal pad, Exhibit A, admitted. Time, 9:23 a.m. The hearing continued. Motion after motion. Objection after objection. Objection. Hearsay. Sustained. Objection. Speculation. Sustained. Objection. Relevance. Sustained. The pattern was unmistakable. Every defense argument blocked. Every prosecution claim accepted. Solomon documented each ruling, each timestamp, each exchange. The legal pad filled with evidence of something the law had a name for: judicial bias. At 10:47 a.m., Solomon made his move. Your Honor, at this time, defense moves to file a motion for recusal. The courtroom stilled. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet. Judge Ashworth's face went from ruddy to crimson. Excuse me? A motion for recusal, Your Honor, filed under Georgia Code Section 15-18. The basis: documented pattern of procedural irregularities in cases involving African American defendants represented by African American counsel. Cassian Merrill was on his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. I'm citing the record. Solomon's voice carried no heat, only precision. JQC complaint numbers 22-47, 23-12, and 23-51, all involving similar fact patterns, all filed against this court. The gallery erupted in whispers. Pastor Silas Yates sat forward in his pew, watching intently. The court reporter's fingers flew across her stenotype. Judge Ashworth's gavel came down 3 times before silence returned. Mr. Vance. The words were ice. You are accusing me, in my courtroom, of bias? I'm citing the record, Your Honor. The facts speak for themselves. A long moment. The judge's hand trembled slightly on his gavel. Then, motion denied. And let me be clear, Counselor. Attorneys who come into my jurisdiction with agendas find that this court has a long memory. He leaned forward. Do I make myself understood? Solomon met his eyes, held them. Understood, Your Honor. I'd like the court reporter to read back your statement for the record. Dahlia Sims, the court reporter, young, black, the only person in this courtroom besides Solomon who might understand what was actually happening, looked up from her machine. Her fingers hesitated. Ma'am. Solomon's voice was quiet but clear. The readback is requested pursuant to Georgia Rules of Court Reporting, Section 14B. It's my right to have statements clarified for the record. She looked at the judge. He said nothing. His silence was permission, or at least not refusal. Dahlia's voice was steady when she spoke. Attorneys who come into my jurisdiction with agendas find that this court has a long memory. Do I make myself understood? The words hung in the air, documented, permanent, part of a record that would eventually find its way to the JQC investigation file. Judge Ashworth's gavel fell. Court is in recess, 30 minutes. He rose and disappeared into chambers. The courtroom exhaled. This attorney just documented judicial misconduct in real time, but the judge's allies are already moving. Stay subscribed because the retaliation starts in 3, 2, 1. The hallway outside courtroom 3 was institutional beige. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, the smell of floor wax, and decades of human anxiety. Solomon stood near the water fountain, reviewing his notes, when footsteps approached from behind. "Heard you tried to get the judge thrown off your case." Brick Harmon, arms crossed, filling the hallway with his presence. Solomon turned slowly. "I filed a motion. That's standard procedure." "In Atlanta, maybe. Not here." Brick stepped closer. "Personal space violation. Deliberate intimidation. This county takes care of its own. You might want to remember that." Solomon took a drink of water. Slow, controlled. When he straightened, he looked directly at the bailiff's badge, 4471, and wrote the number on his legal pad. "Appreciated." "What are you writing?" "Notes." "About what?" "About this conversation." Solomon capped his pen. "Is there something else you wanted to discuss, Deputy Harmon? Because I have a client to prepare." Brick's hand shot out, grabbed Solomon's wrist, hard enough to hurt. "I'm trying to help you, counselor. Give you some friendly advice. Take your case, take your client, and go back to Atlanta. This isn't your fight." Solomon didn't pull away, didn't raise his voice, just looked at the hand on his wrist, then up at Brick's face. "Remove your hand." "Or what?" "Or this becomes documentation of assault on an officer of the court. Georgia Code Section 16-1023. Misdemeanor at minimum, felony if injury results." A pause. "I'm not injured yet, but my wrist is starting to hurt." The moment stretched. Then Brick released him, stepped back. His smile was thin, dangerous. "Watch yourself, counselor. Accidents happen in this building." He walked away. Solomon rubbed his wrist, red marks visible, already beginning to fade. He photographed them with his phone, time-stamped, added to the file. Then he returned to the courtroom to prepare for the afternoon session. The rest of the hearing followed the established pattern. Objections sustained, evidence blocked, procedural obstacles at every turn. But Solomon had what he needed: a record, documentation, the foundation for something larger than one man's freedom. At 4:17 p.m., Judge Ashworth recessed the hearing until the following week. Caleb Dunmore was returned to custody. The gallery filed out slowly, Pastor Yates pausing at the door to catch Solomon's eye. A slight nod. Understanding passed between them. Solomon packed his briefcase and headed for the exit. He was halfway to his rental car when he realized he wasn't alone. The parking garage was concrete and shadow, the kind of space where sound echoed and footsteps could come from anywhere. Solomon's keys were in his hand when two figures emerged from behind a support column: Brick Harmon and the younger deputy, Archer Phelps. "Counselor." Brick's voice bounced off concrete. "Hold up." Solomon stopped, turned, kept his back to his car. "Deputy, got a report of suspicious activity in the garage. Need to verify your identity." "You've verified my identity every day this week." "New report, new verification." Brick stepped closer. "Hands on the vehicle." Solomon complied, slowly, watching Archer Phelps in his peripheral vision, the hesitation in his posture, the way his hand stayed away from his weapon while Brick's rested on his holster. "Spread 'em." The pat-down was brutal, nothing like the courthouse screening. This was punishment dressed as procedure. Brick's hands pressed hard into Solomon's ribs, his shoulders, the small of his back. "Briefcase." Solomon said nothing as Brick grabbed it, flipped the latches, dumped the contents onto the concrete floor. Legal pads scattered, pens rolled under cars, case files fanned across the ground. "What's all this?" Brick held up Solomon's primary legal pad, the one with 6 weeks of documentation, every badge number, every timestamp, every exact quote. "Looks like a lot of notes about the judge, about me." He flipped through pages. You writing a book, counselor? Those documents are protected under attorney-client privilege and work product doctrine. Fancy words. Legal words. Reviewing them without consent could constitute a violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Brick's face went red in the garage's dim light. You threatening me with federal charges? I'm informing you of the law. What you do with that information is your choice. A long moment. Brick's hand tightened on the legal pad. Then, he shoved Solomon, hard. Solomon's back slammed into the car. His head snapped back, hitting the window frame. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Pain, sharp and immediate, radiated from his skull. Oops. Brick's smile was wide. Lost my balance. You okay there, counselor? Archer Phelps stepped forward. Brick, maybe we should... We're done here. Brick dropped the legal pad onto the concrete. Papers scattered in the oil-stained puddles. Pick up your papers, counselor, and maybe think about heading back to Atlanta. This county's got enough lawyers. They walked away. Their footsteps echoed in the empty garage until silence returned. Solomon remained against the car, breathing, counting. When his vision cleared, he touched the back of his head. Tender. Would be a knot tomorrow. Maybe a mild concussion. Nothing that required a hospital. Nothing that would slow him down. But everything that would build the case. He looked down at his jacket. The small pin on the lapel, the one that looked decorative but wasn't, had captured everything. The recording device clipped to his belt had done the rest. He knelt slowly, gathering his scattered papers. Each document photographed where it fell. Chain of custody maintained. Evidence preserved. When he stood, he noticed something else. A blinking red light on Archer Phelps' uniform. The body camera he'd been wearing throughout the encounter. The footage that neither deputy realized had captured everything. Every word, every shove, every threat. Someone in this department would eventually access that footage. Someone with a conscience. Someone willing to crack the wall. Solomon just had to hold on until they did. The Pinewood Motor Lodge room felt smaller after dark. Solomon sat on the edge of the bed, ice pack pressed to the back of his head, reviewing the day's events in his mind. The hearing, the motion, the recusal request, the readback of Ashworth's threat, the hallway confrontation, the parking garage assault, 6 hours of work, 6 hours of evidence, 6 hours closer to bringing down a system that had operated unchecked for decades. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Hazel Odom. Received your daily report. Evidence compelling. Recommend accelerated timeline given physical escalation. Your safety is paramount. Do you wish to proceed or extract? Solomon typed his response. Proceeding. Have documentation of assault by Harmon. Unknown. Whether body camera captured incident. Will continue observation and evidence collection. Request monitoring of county communications for coordinated response. He sent the message, deleted it, set down the phone. His sister's photograph watched from the nightstand. 23 years old. Before everything went wrong. They hurt me today, he said quietly. Pushed me into a car. Probably would have done worse if the junior deputy hadn't been there. The photograph offered no response. But I'm still standing, still documenting, still building the case. He touched the frame. Cool glass under his fingertips. I promised you I'd make it right. I meant it. Outside, the Georgia night pressed against the window. Cicadas sang their endless chorus. Somewhere in Braxton, Judge Garnet Ashworth was probably having dinner, confident that his intimidation had worked, that the Atlanta attorney would give up and go home. He didn't know that Solomon had been intimidated by better men in worse circumstances. Didn't know that the legal pad scattered across a parking garage floor contained documentation that would end careers. Didn't know that the system he'd protected for 31 years was finally being held accountable. Solomon set down the ice pack, opened his laptop, began typing his full report to the JQC. The work continued. The next morning brought rain, thick southern rain that turned the streets into rivers and the courthouse parking lot into a lake. Solomon arrived at 8:32 a.m., umbrella in hand, and found the metal detector line longer than usual. Brick Harmon was working security again. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Recognition, hostility, the silent communication of enemies who'd moved beyond pretense. The screening took 53 minutes. "Random additional checks," Brick said when Solomon finally passed through. "Can't be too careful with out-of-county visitors." Solomon collected his briefcase without comment, walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the third floor. The doors opened to chaos. Deputies filled the hallway outside courtroom 3, voices raised, radios crackling. Ivory Prescott stood near the clerk's office door, face pale, speaking rapidly into a phone. Solomon approached carefully. "What's happening?" A young deputy, not Archer Phelps, someone new, blocked his path. "Courtroom's closed this morning. Judge's orders." "I have a hearing scheduled at 9 a.m. "Postponed. Something came up." "What came up?" The deputy's face went carefully blank. "Above my pay grade." Solomon stepped to the side, looking past the security perimeter toward the courtroom doors. Through the small window he could see Judge Ashworth at the bench, Cassian Merrill beside him, both men huddled over something on the desk. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Use secure protocol." He found a quiet corner near the stairwell, opened the encrypted channel, found one message from Hazel Odom. "Urgent. Body camera footage from Phelps A. Accessed at 02:14 this morning. Download terminal. Records 03. File. Incident 20240412-1847 Phelps. MP4. Unknown user credentials. Footage transmitted to local media outlet at 02:47. Story expected to break by noon." Solomon read the message twice, then deleted it. Someone inside the department had leaked the footage. Someone with access to the records system had downloaded the file in the middle of the night and sent it to journalists. The crack in the wall had appeared. Now the question was, what would the wall do to protect itself? The story broke at 11:43 a.m. WBXR-TV, the regional news affiliate, ran it as their lead. Exclusive, video shows deputy assaulting attorney in courthouse parking garage. Solomon watched the report on his phone, standing in the lobby of the motor lodge, rain still streaming down the windows. The footage was grainy but clear. Brick Harmon's voice audible. "Lost my balance." The shove visible. Solomon's back hitting the car, the scattered papers, the thread about accidents. The news anchor's voice provided context. The attorney in the video, Solomon Vance, is representing a local mechanic on auto theft charges. Mercer County Sheriff's Office has declined to comment on the incident. His phone buzzed again. This time a phone call. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Vance?" A woman's voice, tight, professional. "This is Captain Adela Moreno, Mercer County Sheriff's Office Internal Affairs Division. I need you to come to my office immediately." "Regarding?" "I think you know regarding." A pause. "The footage is everywhere. I need your statement before this becomes something I can't control." Solomon looked out the window at the rain, at the small town that was about to become very uncomfortable for certain powerful people. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, gathered his things, headed into the storm. The Internal Affairs Office occupied a small suite in the Sheriff's Administrative Building, separated from the main station by a locked door and several layers of bureaucratic insulation. Captain Adela Moreno met Solomon in the lobby, mid-40s, Hispanic, the exhausted expression of someone who'd spent years investigating colleagues who didn't want to be investigated. "Thank you for coming so quickly. The video speaks for itself. Videos often do." She led him through the locked door, down a corridor of closed offices, into an interview room that smelled like coffee and tension. "But I need to hear your version, for the record." Solomon sat, took out his legal pad, placed his pen beside it. "May I record this conversation?" Moreno hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps establish the facts." He activated his recording device, stated the date, Time, location, participants. On April 12th, at approximately 6:47 p.m., I was leaving the courthouse through parking structure B when I was approached by Deputy Brick Harmon and Deputy Archer Phelps. The account took 17 minutes. Every detail, every word exchanged, every physical contact. Solomon spoke without notes. He didn't need them. The events were burned into his memory with the clarity of trauma. When he finished, Moreno sat back in her chair. "You're very precise." "I'm an attorney. Precision is the job." "Most attorneys I interview don't remember badge numbers." "Most attorneys haven't been documenting patterns of misconduct for 6 weeks." The words landed. Moreno's expression shifted, surprise, then calculation. 6 weeks. You've been in Mercer County for 6 weeks? I've been representing Mr. Dunmore for 6 weeks. The documentation is incidental to that representation. Is it? Solomon met her eyes. Said nothing. Moreno leaned forward. Mr. Vance, I've been doing this job for 11 years. I know what a civil rights investigation looks like. And I know what an attorney who's more than an attorney looks like. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the rain. The footage has already been shared with the county prosecutor's office and with the state attorney general. This isn't going to stay local. No, it's not. Deputy Harmon is on administrative leave as of an hour ago. Deputy Phelps has been placed on desk duty pending investigation. She turned to face him. But that's not enough, is it? Not for what you're really doing here. Solomon remained silent. I've seen the JQC complaint files, Moreno said quietly. 43 complaints, 6 years, all dismissed. She paused. I added 2 of my own. Internal concerns about judicial interference with investigations. Those were dismissed too. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be sorry, just... She stopped, seemed to consider her next words carefully. Just make sure it matters this time, that something actually changes. Solomon stood, gathered his things. That's what I'm here for, Captain. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. The footage that was leaked from the body camera. Do you know who accessed the records system? Moreno shook her head. Terminal showed credentials that don't match any current employee. Either someone deleted their account after downloading or... She trailed off. Or someone in IT wanted to make sure it couldn't be traced back to them. Something like that. Solomon nodded, opened the door, turned back one last time. There are good people in this system, Captain. People who want things to change but don't know how to make it happen safely. Those people deserve protection. I know. I've been trying to protect them for 11 years. Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of 2 people fighting the same war from different trenches. Thank you for your time, Solomon said. He left the Internal Affairs office and walked into the rain. The County Commission meeting convened at 2 p.m. in the basement auditorium of the municipal building, a space designed for 40 people that currently held over 150. News cameras lined the back wall. Residents filled every seat and crowded the aisles. Solomon stood near the rear exit observing. Commissioner Fiona Langford sat at the center of the raised platform, flanked by 4 other commissioners who looked varying degrees of uncomfortable. She was 62, silver-haired, the kind of politician who'd survived multiple administrations by knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Today, she chose to speak. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Her voice carried the practiced warmth of 1,000 town halls. I know there's been some concern in the community about recent events. I want to assure everyone that Mercer County takes allegations against law enforcement seriously. A voice from the crowd. Then why is Deputy Harmon only on administrative leave? That video shows assault. Murmurs of agreement. Fiona raised her hands. The investigation is ongoing. Due process must be followed. I'm sure we can all agree that rushing to judgment serves no one. Unless you're black, another voice called out. "Then judgment comes pretty quick." The auditorium erupted. Voices raised. Commissioner Langford's gavel came down repeatedly, struggling to restore order. Solomon watched her face, saw the calculation happening in real time, the damage control, the narrative management. Then she said something that made him reach for his legal pad. "I want to address another concern that's been raised, specifically about outside interference in our judicial system. We've received reports of attorneys from Atlanta and other cities coming to Mercer County with political agendas, filing frivolous motions, wasting taxpayer resources." She was looking directly at him when she said it. These outside agitators may believe they're helping our community, but disrupting our courts, attacking our judges, making baseless accusations, that doesn't help anyone. It only creates division. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some applause, some angry shouts, most just confused murmuring. Solomon wrote in his legal pad, "Commissioner Langford, public statement targeting investigation. Date. Time. Direct quote, outside agitators." The meeting continued for another hour, accomplishing nothing, promising everything. The standard performance of democracy that served to diffuse anger without addressing causes. But Solomon had what he needed. Another piece of the pattern. Another name in the coordination chain. Judge Ashworth, Ada Merrill, Deputy Harmon, and now Commissioner Langford. The conspiracy was taking shape. Time. Evening brought another message from Hazel Odom. State Attorney General has opened preliminary inquiry based on video evidence. Scope: potential civil rights violation under 18 U.S.C. Secor 242, requesting federal jurisdiction review. Solomon read it twice, then responded, "Understood. Will continue documentation. Advise on timeline for reveal." Her reply came quickly. Timeline accelerated. Video publicity has forced their hand. Be prepared for increased pressure. They know something is happening, but don't know what. He set down the phone, looked at the legal pads stacked on the desk. 6 weeks of evidence, 43 complaints, statistical analysis, witness statements, video footage. The case against Judge Garnet Ashworth was nearly complete. Now came the hardest part, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. The following morning, Solomon received an email from the Georgia State Bar. Complaint filed against Solomon Vance, bar number 287431. Dear Mr. Vance, this letter serves as formal notification that a complaint has been filed against you by Assistant District Attorney Cashin Merrill of Mercer County. The complaint alleges 1. Filing frivolous motions for purposes of harassment and delay. 2. Conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. 3. Misrepresentation of material facts to the court. You have 30 days to respond. Solomon read the complaint 3 times, noted the coordination, Merrill filing immediately after the video leaked, attempting to shift the narrative, put Solomon on defense instead of offense. Standard tactic. Predictable. He spent 4 hours drafting his response. 37 pages. 14 Georgia Supreme Court precedents. 3 Federal Circuit decisions. Exhibits lettered A through M. The response would arrive at the State Bar in 48 hours. Complete. Annotated. Devastating. Let them try to paint him as frivolous. His documentation would speak for itself. Day 12 brought an unexpected visitor. Solomon was eating breakfast at the Wagon Wheel Diner, same booth, same coffee, same grilled cheese, when a man in his early 70s sat down across from him without invitation. Pastor Silas Yates. "Mr. Vance." "Pastor." "Mind if I join you?" Solomon gestured at the seat the pastor had already occupied. "It seems that decision's been made." Pastor Yates smiled, warm, genuine, the expression of a man who'd learned to find humor in difficult circumstances. "I've been watching you these past 2 weeks. The hearings, the motions, the way you don't flinch when they push back. It's not my first difficult courtroom. No, I don't imagine it is." The pastor paused, seemed to gather his thoughts. My congregation has been praying for Caleb Dunmore, and for his lawyer. But I've noticed something, Mr. Vance. Something that doesn't quite add up. Solomon set down his coffee. What's that? A solo practitioner from Atlanta doesn't normally file recusal motions citing JQC complaint numbers. Doesn't normally quote federal statutes at deputies in parking garages. Doesn't normally stay calm when powerful men threaten him. Perhaps I'm just thorough. Perhaps. The pastor's eyes met his, held them. Or perhaps you're something more than a solo practitioner from Atlanta. The silence stretched. Outside, a truck rolled past the window. Inside, the breakfast crowd continued their conversations, oblivious to the exchange happening in the corner booth. What makes you say that? Solomon asked finally. 50 years of watching people. 50 years of learning to see what they're really saying beneath what they appear to say. Pastor Yates leaned forward. You're not here just for Caleb Dunmore. You're here for all of them. Every person who's been railroaded through that courthouse. Every complaint that got buried. Every family that gave up hoping for justice. Solomon said nothing. I don't know who you really are, Mr. Vance, and I'm not asking you to tell me. But I want you to know something. The pastor's voice dropped. Whatever you're doing here, we'll support you, the church, the community. We've been waiting a long time for someone who couldn't be intimidated, someone who'd actually fight back. Solomon looked at the old man across the table, saw the weight of decades in his eyes, the accumulated grief of watching his community suffer injustice without recourse. Be careful, Solomon said quietly. The people I'm investigating don't take kindly to witnesses. I've been careful my whole life. Careful when they burned crosses on my lawn in '64. Careful when they arrested my son for driving while black in '87. Careful when they shot my nephew at a traffic stop in 2012. The pastor's voice didn't waver. I'm 72 years old, Mr. Vance. I'm tired of being careful. I want to see change before I die. Solomon reached across the table, shook the pastor's hand. Then help me fill that courtroom, every hearing, every day. Witnesses matter, eyes matter. The more people watching, the harder it is for them to do what they do in the dark. Pastor Yates nodded. Consider it done. He stood, left cash on the table for both their meals, paused at the door. You're not just an attorney from Atlanta, are you? It wasn't a question. Solomon met his eyes, said nothing. Pastor Yates smiled. I didn't think so. He walked out into the morning sun. The pieces are falling into place. The coalition is forming, but the judge's allies have one more move to make, and it's going to change everything. Make sure you're subscribed, because the footage that surfaces next will shock even those who thought they'd seen it all. The following week brought the critical hearing. Courtroom 3 filled to capacity by 8:45 a.m. Pastor Yates's congregation in the gallery, local journalists in the press section, court observers from the ACLU and NAACP Legal Defense Fund scattered throughout. The attention had grown since the video leaked. What had been a minor preliminary hearing in a rural county had become something larger. Solomon arrived at 8:32, passed through security in only 23 minutes, faster than any day before. Brick Harmon was notably absent from the screening station. His replacement, a young woman Solomon hadn't seen before, waved him through without comment. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Tension hummed beneath the surface of every conversation, every glance, every rustle of paper. At 9 a.m., Judge Ashworth entered from chambers. The gallery rose. The judge's eyes moved across the crowd, noting the faces, the cameras, the unprecedented scrutiny. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the bench. Court is in session. The hearing proceeded through its procedural motions, evidence admitted, objections ruled upon. The choreography of justice, performed for an audience that was finally watching. At 10:15 a.m., Solomon made his next move. Your Honor, at this time, The defense requests a status hearing on the pending motion to suppress. Cassian Merrill rose quickly. Objection. The motion was denied last week. The motion was taken under advisement, Your Honor. I have no record of a formal ruling. Judge Ashworth's face flushed. The motion had been denied, verbally, off the record, in the hallway outside chambers. But Solomon was right. There was no formal ruling documented. The court will address the motion at the appropriate time. With respect, Your Honor, the appropriate time was last week. My client remains in custody pending resolution of this hearing. Every day of delay is a day of his life taken without due process. The gallery stirred. Pastor Yates nodded from the front row. Judge Ashworth's gavel came down. Mr. Vance, I will not be lectured on procedure in my own courtroom. I'm not lecturing, Your Honor. I'm citing Georgia Uniform Superior Court Rule 6.3. Motions not ruled upon within 7 business days are deemed denied, preserving grounds for immediate appeal. Silence. Cassian Merrill looked at the judge. The judge looked at his clerk. Ivory Prescott's face had gone pale. They'd miscalculated. They'd assumed Solomon wouldn't know the obscure procedural rule that governed unaddressed motions. They'd assumed he was just another outside attorney who could be delayed and frustrated until he gave up. They'd assumed wrong. The motion to suppress, Judge Ashworth said slowly, is hereby denied, for the record. Noted, Your Honor. Defense reserves all rights to appeal. The hearing continued, but something had shifted. The balance of power in the courtroom was no longer absolute. Judge Ashworth's control, his ability to manipulate procedure without consequence, had been challenged publicly. And everyone in that room knew it. At noon, the hearing recessed for lunch. Solomon exited through the main doors, briefcase in hand, legal pad under his arm. The hallway was crowded, journalists seeking comments, observers discussing what they'd seen, deputies maintaining their posts with expressions of studied neutrality. He was halfway to the elevator when someone grabbed his arm. Not Brick Harmon. This time it was Cassian Merrill, the ADA, his face tight with controlled fury. A word, counselor. Solomon allowed himself to be pulled into an empty conference room. The door closed behind them. What the hell do you think you're doing? Merrill's voice was a hiss. That stunt with the motion was perfectly legitimate procedure. You're making the judge look incompetent. The judge is incompetent. That's why the JQC has 43 complaints against him. Merrill's face went white. How do you know about... I'm an attorney, Mr. Merrill. I know how to research. I know how to file FOIA requests. And I know how to read patterns when I see them. The ADA stepped closer. His cologne was expensive. His tie was silk. His expression was murder poorly concealed. You think you're going to waltz into this county and tear everything down? You think it's that simple? I think justice isn't supposed to depend on which county you're in. Justice. Merrill laughed. Harsh. Bitter. You want to talk about justice? Do you have any idea how many cases I've prosecuted in this courthouse? How many dangerous people I've put behind bars? The system works, counselor. It works because people like me and Judge Ashworth make sure it works. For whom does it work? Solomon's voice was quiet. For Caleb Dunmore, arrested for stealing his own truck? For the 16 black defendants in Priscilla Waller's caseload getting worse plea offers than comparable white defendants? For the 8 attorneys who filed JQC complaints and watched them disappear? Merrill's hand came up. For a moment, Solomon thought the prosecutor would actually strike him. Then the conference room door opened. Captain Adela Moreno stood in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable. Mr. Merrill, Mr. Vance, the hallway is a public space. Conversations in conference rooms are not. Merrill smoothed his tie, stepped back. His composure returned, like a mask sliding into place. Just a professional discussion, Captain. Nothing to concern internal affairs. Everything concerns internal affairs right now. Moreno looked at Solomon. The Attorney General's office wants to speak with you. They've sent someone from Atlanta. Solomon nodded. I'll be there shortly. He walked past Merrill without another word. The prosecutor's eyes followed him, calculating, hostile, already planning his next move. But Solomon had planned further. The Attorney General's representative was a woman named Grace Holloway, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She'd commandeered a conference room in the sheriff's administrative building and was waiting when Solomon arrived. "Mr. Vance, thank you for meeting with me." "Of course." They sat across from each other, coffee cups between them, the weight of what was about to happen pressing against the walls. "The video has created complications," Holloway said. "Deputy Harmon's actions appear to constitute assault under Georgia Code Section 16-520. The question is whether federal charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242 are also warranted." "They are? You sound certain." "I am." Solomon opened his briefcase, removed a folder, slid it across the table. "This is my complete documentation of the incident. Timestamps, witness identification, audio recording from a device I was wearing, still photographs of the marks on my wrist from an earlier confrontation." Holloway reviewed the file. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes widened slightly as she turned pages. "This is thorough. That's my job." "Your job as an attorney?" Solomon met her eyes. "My job." A long pause. Holloway set down the folder. "Mr. Vance, I've been with the AG's office for 9 years. I've investigated police misconduct, judicial corruption, civil rights violations at every level. I know what a standard witness statement looks like, and I know what a professional investigation file looks like." "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you are." She leaned forward. "Who are you really working for?" The moment stretched. Outside, rain began to fall again, Georgia's endless spring showers beating against the window. "I'm an attorney representing a client facing wrongful charges," Solomon said carefully. "Everything else is speculation." Holloway studied him, then nodded slowly. "All right. Let's work with what you've given me." She stood, gathered the folder. "I'll be in Mercer County for the next several days. Whatever is happening here, whatever investigation is running parallel to my own, I want to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes." "Understood. And Mr. Vance?" She paused at the door. "Be careful. The people you're documenting have 30 years of practice at making problems disappear. Don't become one of their problems." She left. The door closed behind her. Solomon remained seated. Processing. The AG's office was now actively involved. Federal jurisdiction was being considered. The pressure on Judge Ashworth and his allies was mounting. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But plans, he knew, had a way of changing when the enemy decided to fight back. The counterattack came the next morning. Solomon arrived at the courthouse to find a crowd gathered around the entrance. News cameras, journalists, deputies keeping the public at a distance. A press conference was underway. Commissioner Fiona Langford stood at a portable podium, flanked by County Attorney Wendell Graves and, to Solomon's surprise, a man he'd never seen before. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, the bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Thank you all for coming," Langford said. "I'd like to introduce Judge Harrison Pike, Chief Judge of the Georgia Court of Appeals, who has agreed to speak with us today about recent events in Mercer County." Chief Judge Pike stepped to the microphone. His voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of judicial authority. "Recent media coverage has created serious concerns about the integrity of ongoing proceedings in this county. When judges are attacked, when court officers are vilified, when outside parties attempt to influence the course of justice, we all suffer." He paused, let the words settle. "I've spoken with my colleagues on the appellate bench. We are united in our support for Chief Judge Garnet Ashworth and the Mercer County judicial system. These baseless accusations, these politically motivated attacks, will not stand." Solomon watched from the edge of the crowd, noted the coordination, the appellate judge brought in to provide cover, the commissioner managing the media, the county attorney standing by for legal defense. They were circling the wagons, bringing in reinforcements. trying to intimidate anyone who might support the investigation. But they didn't know what Solomon knew. They didn't know about the JQC authorization letter in his briefcase. They didn't know about the investigation that had been building for 18 months. They didn't know that the man they were dismissing as an outside attorney had the power to end careers with a single phone call to the governor's office. Solomon wrote in his legal pad, Pike, H., Chief Judge, Court of Appeals. Public statement supporting Ashworth. Date. Time. Coordination with Langford and Graves confirmed. The conspiracy was deeper than he'd realized. But the deeper it went, the harder it would fall. The afternoon brought another hearing, another packed gallery, another round of procedural warfare. But something had changed. Judge Ashworth's manner was different, more cautious. His rulings came slower, with more references to case law, more documentation in the record. He was protecting himself, building a paper trail that would support his decisions on appeal. Too late, Solomon thought. The evidence is already in the file. At 3:47 p.m., the hearing recessed. Caleb Dunmore was returned to custody, still in Orange, still cuffed, but with a preliminary hearing date set for the following week, and a suppression motion now formally on the record. Progress. Slow, grinding, frustrating progress. The kind that built cases and exhausted souls. Solomon packed his briefcase, headed for the exit. Dahlia Sims, the court reporter, intercepted him in the hallway. "Mr. Vance?" He stopped. "Ms. Sims." She was young, mid-20s probably, with the careful expression of someone who understood the risks of what she was about to say. "I have transcripts from last week's hearing, the exact wording of everything the judge said." She glanced around, checking for observers, including some things that didn't make it into the official record. Solomon's expression didn't change. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've worked in that courtroom for 3 years. Because I've watched him do this to other attorneys. Because—" She stopped, gathered herself. "Because someone needs to actually do something about it." "That's a dangerous position to take." "I know," her voice was steady. Voice. "But some things are more important than being safe." Solomon reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card. Not his own. Hazel Odom's, the JQC investigator. "If you want to make a formal statement, call this number. Use a phone that isn't connected to your name. Be prepared to testify if it comes to that." Dahlia took the card, looked at it, then back at Solomon. "You're not just an attorney, are you?" The third person to say that this week. Solomon was beginning to wonder if his cover was as solid as he'd believed. "I'm someone who wants the same thing you do," he said. "Justice. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous." Dahlia nodded, slipped the card into her pocket. "I'll call tonight." She walked away. Solomon watched her go, then headed for his car, mind already working through the implications. Another witness. Another crack in the wall. Another step closer to bringing the whole thing down. That night, in his motel room, Solomon received 3 encrypted messages. The first was from Hazel Odom. Court reporter contacted. Statement being arranged. Evidence growing stronger. The second was from the AG's office. Federal charges recommended. Grand jury presentation being scheduled. Timeline: 3 to 4 weeks. The third was from a number he didn't recognize. "I have footage you haven't seen. Parking garage. Different angle. Shows everything. Meet me tomorrow. Chapel Hill Baptist, 6 a.m. Come alone." Solomon stared at the message for a long time. The footage from Archer Phelps's body camera had already been leaked. What other footage could exist? It could be a trap, an attempt to isolate him, get him alone in an empty church at dawn, and make the problem disappear. Or it could be what the message claimed: more evidence, more documentation, more ammunition for the case. He typed his response. "I'll be there." Then he set his alarm for 5 a.m. and tried to sleep. Chapel Hill Baptist Church sat 3 miles outside Braxton proper, a white clapboard building with a modest steeple and a gravel parking lot that was empty when Solomon arrived at 5:52 a.m. He parked near the entrance, left his car running, checked his recording devices. At 6 a.m. precisely, another car pulled into the lot. Archer Phelps stepped out. The junior deputy looked nothing like he had in the parking garage. Gone was the uncertain hesitation, the deference to Brick Harmon. This was someone who'd made a decision and committed to it. Mr. Vance? Deputy Phelps. They faced each other across the gravel. Morning mist hung in the air. Birds called from the surrounding trees. "I'm the one who leaked the footage," Phelps said. "Used credentials from an IT account that got deactivated last month. No way to trace it. I figured. But that footage only showed part of what happened." The deputy reached into his jacket, pulled out a USB drive. "This is the rest, from my personal phone. I started recording when Brick wasn't looking." Solomon took the drive. "What's on it?" "The conversation before you arrived. Brick talking about what he was going to do to you. Calling you the—" He stopped, swallowed. "Using words I won't repeat, and Commissioner Langford's name came up." "Langford?" "Brick said she told him to handle the situation. Those were her exact words. Handle the situation with the Atlanta attorney. He said she'd make sure he was protected." Solomon's mind raced. Direct evidence of coordination between the commissioner and the assault. Not just suspicion, proof. "Why are you giving this to me?" he asked. Phelps looked at the church behind them, the modest steeple, the quiet graveyard beside it. "My grandmother's buried there. She was a civil rights activist back in the 60s. Got arrested twice, beaten once, never stopped fighting." His voice thickened. "She'd be ashamed of what this department has become, what I've been part of by staying silent." "You're not silent anymore." "No, I'm not." He met Solomon's eyes. "I know what you are, Mr. Vance. I did some research, looked up your bar record, noticed some interesting gaps, some connections that don't make sense for a solo practitioner from Atlanta." Solomon said nothing. "I don't care who you really are. I just care that someone finally does something about what's happening in this county." Phelps stepped back toward his car. "That footage is everything. Use it." He got in his vehicle, drove away. The gravel crunched under his tires until the sound faded into silence. Solomon stood alone in the empty parking lot, USB drive in his hand, the weight of what it contained settling into his bones. The case had just become unbreakable. Two days later, the new footage leaked. This time it wasn't anonymous. Deputy Archer Phelps had given a formal statement to the AG's office, providing the video and testifying about Commissioner Langford's involvement. The story broke at 9 a.m. on every major network. Exclusive, video shows deputy discussing assault plan, names county commissioner. By noon, Commissioner Langford had retained private counsel. By 2 p.m., ADA Cassian Merrill had announced a leave of absence for personal reasons. By 5 p.m., Judge Garnet Ashworth had canceled all scheduled hearings, pending review of administrative matters. The wall was crumbling. Solomon watched the coverage from his motel room, legal pad in hand, documenting every development. His phone buzzed. Hazel Odom. Timeline moved up. JQC emergency session scheduled. You're authorized to proceed with reveal. He typed his response. Tomorrow, courtroom 3, 9 a.m. Then he began preparing the statement that would end 31 years of judicial misconduct. The night before the reveal, Solomon couldn't sleep. He sat at the desk in his motel room, his sister's photograph before him, reviewing the evidence one final time. 43 complaints, 6 years of documentation, statistical analysis, witness statements, video footage, testimony from court reporters, deputies, public defenders. The case against Judge Garnet Ashworth was overwhelming, but overwhelming wasn't the same as complete. The system had survived overwhelming evidence before, had buried it under procedure, dismissed it as politically motivated, protected its own until the spotlight moved on. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the spotlight wouldn't move. Because tomorrow, the man Judge Ashworth thought he'd been intimidating would reveal himself as an Associate Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. And nothing would ever be the same. Solomon touched his sister's photograph. "I promised you I'd make it right. I'm going to keep that promise." The photograph offered no response, but in the silence, Solomon felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Hope. The morning of the reveal broke gray and heavy, clouds pressing low against the Georgia hills like a ceiling about to collapse. Solomon Vance stood at the window of his motel room at 5:47 a.m., watching the first trucks roll down Main Street toward the feed store and the gas station and the courthouse where everything would change. He'd slept perhaps 2 hours, not from nerves, he'd moved past nerves years ago, but from the weight of what was coming. The calculations, the contingencies, the 1,000 small variables that could still go wrong. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Hazel Odom. JQC panel assembled. Judge Stafford presiding. Federal marshals on standby. AG representative confirmed attendance. You have authorization to proceed. He typed his response. Understood. Beginning at 9. Then he showered, shaved, and dressed in his best charcoal suit, the one he reserved for arguments before the Georgia Supreme Court, the one he'd worn when he was sworn in as Associate Justice 4 years ago. Today, he would wear it again, for different reasons. At 7:32 a.m., he checked out of the Pinewood Motor Lodge. The desk clerk, a middle-aged woman who'd been politely distant for 6 weeks, looked up from her paperwork. "Leaving us, Mr. Vance?" "One way or another." He carried his single suitcase to the rental car, placed it in the trunk, and drove toward the Mercer County Courthouse for the last time. Courtroom 3 was packed by 8:45. Every seat in the gallery filled. Pastor Silas Yates and his congregation occupied the first 3 rows on the left. Journalists from Atlanta, Savannah, and 3 national outlets crowded the press section. Representatives from the ACLU, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Southern Poverty Law Center sat scattered throughout, notepads open, phones silenced. And in the back row, where Solomon hadn't expected to see her, sat Hazel Odom, JQC investigator, the woman who'd been building this case for 18 months before Solomon went undercover. Their eyes met briefly. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. The cavalry was in position. Solomon took his seat at the defense table. His briefcase contained everything: the JQC authorization letter, his credentials, the compiled evidence file, the statistical analysis, the witness statements. 6 weeks of documentation ready to be unleashed. Caleb Dunmore was brought in at 8:53. Orange jumpsuit, metal cuffs, the exhausted eyes of a man who'd stopped believing things could get better. He sat beside Solomon without speaking. "Today's going to be different," Solomon said quietly. Caleb looked at him. "How?" "You'll see." At 9 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Not Brick Harmon, he was still on administrative leave, but a woman Solomon didn't recognize, professional, neutral, the machinery of justice grinding forward despite the chaos surrounding it. Judge Garnet Ashworth entered from chambers. He looked diminished somehow. The flush of angry authority that had colored his face for weeks had faded to something grayer, more uncertain. The press coverage had taken its toll, the leaked footage, the commissioner's lawyer, the ADA's sudden leave of absence. But he was still on the bench, still holding the gavel, still clinging to 31 years of unchecked power. "Court is in session." His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. "Case number 24-07-19, State of Georgia versus Caleb Dunmore. We're here for continuation of preliminary hearing." ADA Cassian Merrill was absent. In his place sat a young prosecutor Solomon had never seen, probably pulled from the district office in Atlanta to cover while the scandal burned through the county's legal establishment. The state is represented by Assistant District Attorney Howard Chen from the Atlanta office, the young man said, rising briefly. I'm here to request a continuance, Your Honor. Given recent developments, the state needs additional time to review the case file. Judge Ashworth nodded. Relief flickered across his face. A continuance would buy time, delay the inevitable. Solomon stood. Your Honor, defense objects to any continuance. My client has been in custody for 6 weeks on charges that should never have been filed. Every additional day of delay is a day of his freedom taken without justification. Mr. Vance, the state has a right to... The state has had 6 weeks to prepare. Solomon's voice carried through the courtroom, steady and clear. The evidence is straightforward. The vehicle registration proves ownership. The 911 call description doesn't match. The arresting officer's statements contain documented inconsistencies. He paused. Let the silence build. But before we address the motion, Your Honor, I need to make a disclosure to this court. The judge's eyes narrowed. What kind of disclosure? A disclosure required under Georgia Code Section 15-1-9.2. Failure to make it would constitute a procedural violation that could affect these proceedings. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The substitute prosecutor looked confused. Judge Ashworth's hand tightened on his gavel. Proceed. Briefly. Solomon reached into his briefcase, removed a folder, opened it on the defense table. Your Honor, my name is Solomon Vance. I am an attorney licensed in Georgia, admitted to this bar for 22 years, but I am also... He removed a laminated credential, held it up for the court to see. Associate Justice Solomon Vance of the Georgia Supreme Court, assigned by the Judicial Qualifications Commission to conduct a formal investigation into judicial conduct in Mercer County Superior Court. Okay. The courtroom exploded. Not with violence, with sound. Voices raised in shock, confusion, disbelief. Pastor Yates half rose from his pew. Journalists scrambled for their phones. The bailiff stepped forward, uncertain what protocol applied when a Supreme Court justice revealed himself in the middle of a hearing. Judge Ashworth's gavel came down 3 times, 4 times, 5 times before the noise subsided. This is... His voice was hoarse. This is highly irregular. I demand... Your Honor, I'm reading from the JQC authorization letter dated January 15th of this year. Solomon's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Quote, pursuant to Georgia Constitution Article 6, Section 7, Paragraph 7, and Georgia Code Section 15-119.1, Associate Justice Solomon Vance is hereby authorized to conduct investigation into allegations of judicial misconduct, case numbers JQC 22-47 through JQC 24-16. He continued reading, each word landing like a hammer blow. Said investigation shall include direct observation of courtroom proceedings, documentation of procedural irregularities, and collection of evidence relevant to alleged violations. The subject of this investigation is Chief Judge Garnet Ashworth of Mercer County Superior Court. The judge's face had gone from gray to white. His hands trembled slightly on the bench. Pursuant to the authority granted by the Georgia Constitution, Solomon continued, Associate Justice Vance is authorized to take any and all actions necessary to complete this investigation, including but not limited to observation of proceedings, collection of evidence, interview of witnesses, and initiation of formal disciplinary proceedings. He set down the letter. Met Judge Ashworth's eyes. Your Honor, under these circumstances, I must inform you that you are automatically recused from further proceedings in this case. Under 28 U.S.C. Section 455, no judge may preside over a matter in which they are a subject of investigation. You can't, Ashworth's voice cracked. You can't just walk into my courtroom and... I can. I have. And everything you say from this point forward will be documented as part of the formal JQC inquiry. The gavel slipped from Ashworth's fingers, clattered against the bench. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom like a period at the end of a sentence. "This case," Solomon said, "is hereby transferred to emergency judicial review. An interim judge will be assigned within 24 hours. My client, Caleb Dunmore, is to be released on his own recognizance pending that review." He turned to the gallery, found Hazel Odom's face. "Investigator Odom, please proceed." Hazel stood, walked to the front of the courtroom. Her voice was calm, professional, the tone of someone who'd been waiting 18 months for this moment. "Chief Judge Ashworth, you are hereby notified that the Judicial Qualifications Commission has scheduled an emergency hearing regarding your conduct on the bench. The hearing will take place in 3 days at the state capitol. You are entitled to legal representation and will be provided an opportunity to respond to the allegations." She handed him a document. He took it with numb fingers. "Additionally," Hazel continued, "the following individuals are notified of their potential involvement in the investigation: ADA Cassian Merrill, Commissioner Fiona Langford, former Deputy Brick Harmon, County Clerk Ivory Prescott." The names fell like dominoes, each one a crack in the wall, each one a person who'd believed they were untouchable. "The investigation is ongoing," Hazel said. "Further notifications may follow as evidence warrants." She stepped back. Solomon remained standing at the defense table, the center of a storm he'd spent 6 weeks creating. Judge Ashworth hadn't moved. His hands still rested on the bench. His eyes were fixed on some middle distance, seeing nothing, processing the destruction of everything he'd built. 31 years. 43 complaints. 6 years of buried evidence. All of it ending now. The reveal that shattered 31 years of corruption. But the fight isn't over. The JQC hearing will determine who faces justice and who walks free. Make sure you're subscribed for the showdown that decides everything. The 3 days between the courtroom revelation and the JQC hearing passed in a blur of legal maneuvering, media coverage, and quiet preparation. Solomon gave exactly one interview to a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who'd been covering judicial misconduct for 15 years. The article ran on page 1, above the fold, with a headline that captured what had happened. "Supreme Court Justice Goes Undercover to Expose Rural Judges' Pattern of Bias." The story detailed everything: the 43 complaints, the statistical disparities, the coordination between judge and prosecutor and commissioner, the assault in the parking garage, the witness testimony from Deputy Phelps and court reporter Dahlia Sims. It also detailed what it cost: 6 weeks living in a budget motel, daily harassment at courthouse security, a bar complaint filed against him, physical assault documented on video, the constant pressure of maintaining cover while building evidence. The reporter asked him why he'd volunteered for the assignment. Solomon told her about his sister, about the wrongful conviction that took 3 years of her life, about the exoneration that came too late to heal what had been broken, about the promise he'd made to her memory. "I promised I'd make it right," he said. "This is how I'm keeping that promise." The interview ran with a photograph of his sister, 23 years old, smiling, frozen in time before everything went wrong. The JQC hearing convened at 10 a.m. on a Thursday in the formal hearing room of the Georgia State Capitol. The room was designed for exactly this purpose: high ceilings, wood paneling, a raised platform where the 7-member panel sat in judgment. Senior Judge Minna Stafford presided, 70 years old, 32 years on the bench, a reputation for fairness that had survived 3 governors and countless political storms. Solomon sat at the petitioner's table with Hazel Odom. Across the room, Judge Garnet Ashworth sat with 2 attorneys. Expensive suits, confident postures, the kind of lawyers who'd never lost a judicial disciplinary case because they'd never faced one with this much evidence. The gallery was packed. Pastor Silas Yates had brought a delegation from Braxton. Priscilla Waller sat in the second row, her own documentation ready if needed. Dahlia Sims was there, Deputy Archer Phelps, Captain Adela Moreno from Internal Affairs. Witnesses, allies. People who'd spent years watching injustice and finally had someone willing to do something about it. This emergency hearing is convened pursuant to Georgia Code Section 15-19.1, Paragraph 4, Judge Stafford announced. We are here to review preliminary findings in JQC Investigation 24-16 concerning Chief Judge Garnet Ashworth of Mercer County Superior Court. She paused, looked at Ashworth. Chief Judge Ashworth, you have the right to legal representation, which you have exercised. You have the right to respond to all allegations presented. You have the right to call witnesses in your defense. Do you understand these rights? I do, Your Honor. Ashworth's voice was steady, but something had changed in his face. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something harder to read. Fear, perhaps, or calculation, or the dawning awareness that 31 years of unchecked power were coming to an end. Justice Vance, please present the findings of your investigation. Solomon stood, walked to the center of the room, placed his documentation on the lectern before him. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the panel. He began with the statistics. Conviction rate disparities, 73% for black defendants versus 41% for white defendants on comparable charges. Sentencing disparities averaging 2.4 years longer for black defendants. Motion denial rates that exceeded statistical significance. These numbers alone would warrant investigation, Solomon said, but numbers only tell part of the story. He moved to the complaints, 43 of them spanning 6 years, 8 different attorneys, all documenting the same patterns: extended security screenings, delayed file access, hostile treatment in the courtroom, retaliation against those who filed formal objections. Every one of these complaints was dismissed or marked pending review, Solomon continued. Not because the evidence was insufficient, but because the system designed to investigate judicial misconduct was itself compromised by the relationships it was meant to oversee. Ashworth's attorneys objected. This is speculation about the JQC's internal processes. The evidence will speak for itself, Solomon said. I have documentation of communications between Chief Judge Ashworth and members of the previous JQC Review Board, personal relationships, political donations, a pattern of influence that prevented meaningful oversight. He produced the emails, printed copies with timestamps and authentication certificates, communications between Ashworth and 3 former JQC members discussing how to manage complaints before they reached formal review. The hearing room went silent. Judge Stafford's expression remained neutral, but her pen moved rapidly across her notepad. The other panel members exchanged glances. Moving to specific incidents, Solomon continued. During my 6 weeks of observation, I documented the following violations of judicial conduct. The list took 20 minutes to read. Improper ex parte communications with the prosecutor. Denial of legitimate motions without legal basis. Witness intimidation in the hallway outside the courtroom. Coordination with county officials to obstruct the investigation. Then came the video evidence. The body camera footage from Deputy Phelps played on a screen at the front of the room. Brick Harmon's voice, clear and unmistakable. Lost my balance. The shove. Solomon's back hitting the car. Then the second video, the one Phelps had recorded secretly on his phone. Harmon's voice again, before Solomon arrived. Commissioner says handle the situation. Atlanta attorney needs to understand this isn't his county. And then, Langford will make sure nothing sticks. She's got the judge in her pocket. Always has. The room erupted. Ashworth's attorneys demanded the recording be excluded as improperly obtained. Judge Stafford overruled them. The evidence was admissible under Georgia's exception for documentation of criminal activity. The coordination is clear, Solomon said when order returned. Chief Judge Ashworth, ADA Cassian Merrill, Commissioner Fiona Langford, Deputy Brick Harmon, a network of mutual protection that operated for years without accountability. He paused, looked directly at Ashworth. Until now. The defense presentation took 2 hours. Ashworth's attorneys argued context. They argued statistics could be explained by legitimate factors. They argued that the complaints were politically motivated attacks by disgruntled attorneys. They argued that the videos had been selectively edited. They did not call Ashworth to testify. That was telling. A judge confident in his innocence would want to explain, defend, justify. A judge who knew the evidence was overwhelming would stay silent and hope his lawyers could create enough doubt to survive. When the defense concluded, Judge Stafford called a recess. The panel withdrew to deliberate. 4 hours passed. Solomon waited in the hallway with Hazel Odom. Pastor Yates stopped by to shake his hand. Priscilla Waller brought coffee. Deputy Phelps nodded from across the corridor, the silent acknowledgement of allies who'd risked everything for this moment. At 6:47 p.m., the panel returned. "Please be seated," Judge Stafford announced. "The panel has reached preliminary findings." The room held its breath. The Judicial Qualifications Commission finds sufficient evidence to support the following actions, effective immediately. She read from the prepared document. 1. Chief Judge Garnet Ashworth is suspended from all judicial duties pending completion of formal disciplinary proceedings. This suspension is without pay, given the severity of the documented violations. A murmur through the gallery. Without pay, harsher than standard procedure. A signal of how seriously the panel viewed the evidence. 2. The Commission refers the following matters for criminal investigation by the Georgia Attorney General and, where appropriate, the United States Department of Justice. She listed them one by one. Deputy Brick Harmon for potential violations of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, and Georgia Code Section 16-520, simple assault. ADA Cassian Merrill for potential violations of Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct 8.4, misconduct involving dishonesty and prejudice to the administration of justice. Commissioner Fiona Langford for potential violations of Georgia Code Section 16-1093, obstruction of justice, and Georgia Code Section 16-10-2, conspiracy to obstruct. County Clerk Ivory Prescott for potential violations of Georgia Code Section 45-11-1, malfeasance in office. The names fell like sentences. Each one a person who'd believed they were untouchable. Each one now facing the possibility of criminal prosecution. 3. The Commission recommends that the Georgia Supreme Court conduct a comprehensive review of all cases adjudicated by Chief Judge Ashworth over the past 6 years. Defendants who may have been improperly convicted or sentenced should be identified for potential relief. 6 years, hundreds of cases, potentially dozens of wrongful convictions or excessive sentences. The scope of the damage was staggering. 4. The Commission recommends that the Georgia General Assembly consider legislation strengthening judicial oversight mechanisms and protecting those who report judicial misconduct from retaliation. Policy change. Systemic reform. The kind of recommendation that might actually prevent this from happening again, or might disappear into committee, never to be heard from again. Judge Stafford set down the document. These findings are preliminary. Formal disciplinary proceedings will continue over the coming months. Chief Judge Ashworth retains the right to respond to all allegations through the established process. She looked at Solomon. Justice Vance, the Commission commends your service in conducting this investigation. Your willingness to place yourself at personal risk for the sake of judicial integrity exemplifies the highest standards of our profession. Solomon nodded, said nothing, because he knew what came next, the part that wasn't in the formal findings, the part that would be announced tomorrow. Tug. The governor's press conference convened at 10 a.m. the following morning on the steps of the state capitol. Governor Patricia Hartwell, 54, former prosecutor, elected on a platform of criminal justice reform, stood at the podium flanked by the full Georgia Supreme Court. 6 justices in their formal robes, 1 empty seat. Thank you all for coming, the governor began. Yesterday, the Judicial Qualifications Commission released preliminary findings in one of the most significant judicial misconduct investigations in Georgia history. Those findings speak for themselves. She paused. Let the weight of the moment settle. But today, I want to talk about the future, about what kind of judicial system we want to build, about the leaders we need to build it. She turned slightly, gesturing to the assembled justices. Chief Justice Morrison has served our state with distinction for 12 years. He has informed me that he will be retiring at the end of this term to spend time with his family. On behalf of all Georgians, I thank him for his service. Applause from the assembled crowd. Chief Justice Morrison, 81 years old, smiled and nodded. The position of Chief Justice is the highest judicial office in our state. It requires someone with unimpeachable integrity, a commitment to equal justice, and the courage to hold our system accountable when it fails to live up to its ideals. The governor turned to face Solomon directly. Today, I am pleased to announce the appointment of Associate Justice Solomon Vance as the next Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Solomon stood motionless, absorbing the moment he'd spent 12 years working toward. Not for the title, not for the power, for the chance to change things from the inside. For the chance to keep a promise made to a sister who'd never lived to see this day. The governor continued speaking, about qualifications, about experience, about vision for the future. But Solomon's mind was elsewhere. On the Pinewood Motor Lodge, on Courtroom 3, on a parking garage where a deputy had shoved him into a car and thought there would be no consequences. On all the people who'd never made it this far, who'd been ground down by a system that protected its own, who'd given up hoping for justice because hope had been taken from them piece by piece. This appointment wasn't just for him, it was for all of them. When the governor finished speaking, Solomon stepped to the microphone. I accept this appointment with humility and with purpose. His voice carried across the Capitol steps, broadcast to millions. What happened in Mercer County wasn't exceptional. It was a visible example of patterns that exist throughout our system. Patterns of bias, patterns of protection, patterns of looking the other way when confronting the truth would be uncomfortable. He paused. My work isn't finished. It's beginning. 3 weeks after the JQC hearing, Caleb Dunmore walked out of the Mercer County Jail a free man. The charges had been dismissed, the arrest record sealed. An interim judge, appointed from the Atlanta Circuit, no connections to Mercer County, had reviewed the evidence and found what Solomon had known all along. There had never been probable cause for the arrest. The whole thing had been manufactured from the beginning. Solomon met him at the jail's release entrance. Caleb's mother was there, tears streaming down her face. Pastor Yates had organized a small welcome party, church members, neighbors, friends who'd never stopped believing in his innocence. Mr. Vance. Caleb's voice was rough. I mean, Justice Vance. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Solomon shook his hand. You need to vote. You need to serve on juries when you're called. You need to watch your local government like they're watching you. I will. Caleb looked at his mother, at the small crowd gathered to welcome him home. I promise I will. His truck was parked at the curb, the black pickup he'd been arrested for stealing. Someone had washed it, polished it until it gleamed. A small gesture, but meaningful. One more thing, Solomon said. The lawsuit. Caleb's eyes widened. Lawsuit? Civil rights violation under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. False arrest. Malicious prosecution. Violation of due process. Solomon handed him a business card. This is a firm in Atlanta that specializes in these cases. They've agreed to represent you pro bono. I don't want money. I just want to move on. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. The settlement, whatever it is, comes from the county's insurance, from taxpayers who deserve to know what their officials did in their name. He paused. And the documentation from your case will become part of the public record. Evidence that can help the next person this happens to. Caleb looked at the card for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll call them. Good. Solomon turned to leave. Caleb called after him. Justice Vance, what you did in that courtroom, I've never seen anything like it. Standing up to a judge in his own courthouse, telling him who you really were. I told him the truth, that's all. That's everything. Caleb's voice cracked. Nobody's ever done that for people like me. Nobody's ever risked anything. Solomon stopped, turned back. That's going to change. I'm going to make sure of it. He walked to his car. Behind him, Caleb embraced his mother. Pastor Yates led the small crowd in a prayer of thanksgiving. The sun broke through the Georgia clouds for the first time in days, a small moment of grace in a story that was far from over. He walked into a hostile courtroom as an anonymous attorney. He walked out as the incoming Chief Justice. But the system that created this corruption doesn't disappear overnight. Stay with us for the aftermath that reveals just how deep the rot goes. The weeks following Solomon's appointment brought a cascade of consequences. Some predictable, others less so. Deputy Brick Harmon resigned from the Mercer County Sheriff's Office 2 days after the JQC hearing. He submitted a 1-paragraph letter citing personal reasons and was last seen loading boxes into a pickup truck at his home. By the time the federal warrant was issued under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, he'd left Georgia entirely. His current location remained unknown. The U.S. Marshal Service added him to their fugitive list. A $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to his arrest. Tips came in sporadically, sightings in Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, but none panned out. Solomon received updates on the search through official channels. Each one was a reminder. Even when the system worked, it worked slowly. Justice delayed was not always justice denied, but it was never justice complete. Ada Cassian Merrill faced a different kind of reckoning. The Georgia State Bar opened formal proceedings against him 3 weeks after the JQC hearing. The charges were extensive: misconduct involving dishonesty, conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice, failure to disclose exculpatory evidence, coordination with judicial officers to obstruct fair proceedings. His lawyers negotiated. In the end, Merrill agreed to surrender his law license voluntarily. No admission of wrongdoing, the standard legal fiction that allowed powerful people to escape without the formal finding of guilt. But his career was over. 12 years as a prosecutor, hundreds of convictions, a reputation built on winning at any cost. All of it gone. Solomon read the announcement in the legal journals. Felt nothing. Merrill's voluntary surrender meant no formal trial, no public accounting of everything he'd done. Another partial victory. Another compromise that let the system protect itself even as it punished one of its members. Commissioner Fiona Langford fought harder. She hired the most expensive criminal defense attorney in Atlanta, a man named Preston Cole, who'd represented governors and senators and corporate executives accused of everything from fraud to murder. His strategy was aggressive: attack the evidence, attack the investigators, attack the process itself. The obstruction charges were politically motivated, Cole argued. The coordination emails were taken out of context. The video recording from Deputy Phelps was improperly obtained and should be excluded. The Attorney General's office pushed back. Evidence was authenticated. Chain of custody documented. Witness testimony corroborated. 6 months after the investigation began, Commissioner Langford accepted a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of misdemeanor obstruction of justice. The felony charges were dropped. The conspiracy count was dismissed. In exchange, she agreed to resign from the county commission, pay a $15,000 fine, and serve 2 years of probation. No jail time, no admission of the full scope of what she'd done. Another compromise. Solomon learned of the plea deal from Hazel Odom, who called him the evening it was finalized. "It's not enough," Hazel said. Her voice was tired. "After everything she did, 2 years probation. It's what the system could achieve. The system should achieve more." Yes. Solomon looked out his office window at the Atlanta skyline. His new office, the Chief Justice's chambers in the Georgia Supreme Court building. It should. That's what we're working to change. Sometimes I wonder if it can change. It can, slowly, painfully, one case at a time. He paused. Langford lost her position, her reputation, her political future. She'll never hold public office again. The network she built is exposed. That matters. Does it matter enough? Solomon thought of his sister, of the promise he'd made, of all the people still waiting for justice that might never come. I don't know, but I have to believe it does. Otherwise, why are we doing this? Hazel was silent for a long moment. I'll keep doing it, she said finally. Because someone has to. That's why we do it, because someone has to. The call ended. Solomon sat alone in his chambers, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. Ivory Prescott, the county clerk, received the lightest consequence of all. The malfeasance charges were dropped entirely. Insufficient evidence, the prosecutor said. Her obstruction of document access could be attributed to administrative confusion rather than intentional misconduct. She kept her job. Solomon received this news from Priscilla Waller, who called him 3 months after the JQC hearing with an update on the county's response to the investigation. Prescott is still behind that counter, Priscilla said, still controlling access to files, still deciding who gets help and who gets stonewalled. Has her behavior changed? Marginally. She's more careful now, more documentation, fewer "the file is unavailable" excuses. Priscilla paused. But she's still there, still part of the system. The system doesn't change overnight. I know, I just hoped... She trailed off. You hoped it would be different this time. Yes. So did I. They sat with that for a moment. Two people who'd fought for change and won something, but not everything. Never everything. The review of Ashworth's cases is proceeding, Priscilla continued. 17 motions for reconsideration filed so far, 4 sentences reduced, 2 convictions overturned on appeal. That's progress. It's slow progress. All progress is slow. Solomon thought of the legal pads stacked in his chambers, the documentation from Mercer County, the evidence of patterns that had operated for decades. But it's still progress. Judge Garnet Ashworth's formal disciplinary hearing took place 8 months after the initial JQC findings. The hearing lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. The full scope of 31 years of misconduct was documented in painful, exhaustive detail. At the end, the panel rendered its verdict. Chief Judge Garnet Ashworth was permanently removed from the bench. His judicial pension was reduced by 50%. He was barred from seeking any judicial appointment in Georgia for the remainder of his life. He was not criminally prosecuted. The Attorney General's office declined to file charges. Insufficient evidence of specific criminal acts, they said. The pattern of bias was clear, but proving beyond a reasonable doubt that any single decision was made with corrupt intent would be nearly impossible. Solomon read the announcement in his chambers, set down the paper, looked at his sister's photograph, which now sat on his desk where he could see it every day. It's not enough, he said quietly. I know it's not enough. The photograph offered no response. But it's something. But it's... He's off the bench. He'll never hurt anyone from that position again. The people he wronged are getting a second chance. The system is watching now, watching in ways it didn't before. He touched the frame. I kept my promise, as best I could. The governor's judicial reform package passed the Georgia General Assembly 14 months after Solomon's appointment as Chief Justice. The legislation was comprehensive. Mandatory body cameras for court security personnel, enhanced whistleblower protections for court employees, independent oversight mechanisms for judicial conduct complaints, statistical reporting requirements for case outcomes by demographic factors. Not everything Solomon had hoped for. Not everything the advocates had demanded, but more than anyone had expected from a system that had resisted change for generations. Solomon testified before the legislature during the debate. His words were careful, measured, the tone of a Chief Justice speaking on matters of institutional reform rather than political controversy. But in the committee room, surrounded by legislators and lobbyists and cameras, he said something that wasn't in his prepared remarks. "I spent 6 weeks living in a budget motel in Mercer County, 6 weeks being harassed at courthouse security, 6 weeks watching a judge abuse his position while everyone around him looked the other way." He paused. "I did that because I could, because my position, when revealed, would protect me from the worst consequences. But most people don't have that protection. Most people who speak up against judicial misconduct face retaliation with no safety net, no credential to reveal, no institution to back them up." His voice hardened. "This legislation matters because it creates that safety net, because it tells court employees and attorneys and citizens that they can report misconduct without destroying their careers, because it tells judges that someone is watching, and that accountability is possible." The legislation passed with bipartisan support. The governor signed it into law, with Solomon standing behind her at the ceremony. Another small victory in a war that would never truly end. 1 year after becoming Chief Justice, Solomon established the Office of Judicial Oversight. It was a new division within the Supreme Court administration, independent of the JQC, focused specifically on pattern analysis and systemic review. Priscilla Waller accepted the position of director after Solomon personally offered her the job. "I'm not sure I'm qualified," she said when he called to make the offer. "You've been documenting judicial misconduct for 6 years. You understand the patterns better than anyone. You know what to look for and where to look for it." "I was just a public defender doing my job." "You were a public defender who refused to stop fighting when everyone told you it was pointless. That's exactly what this position requires." She accepted, left Mercer County for Atlanta, built a team, began the slow, painstaking work of reviewing judicial conduct statewide. Within 6 months, the office had identified 3 additional counties with statistical anomalies similar to Mercer. Investigations were opened, evidence gathered, the machinery of accountability grinding forward. Slowly, always slowly. Deputy Archer Phelps was promoted to sergeant. The recommendation came from Captain Adela Moreno, who'd transferred to the State Patrol after the Mercer County scandal. In her evaluation, she wrote, "Deputy Phelps demonstrated exceptional moral courage in circumstances where silence would have been easier and safer. His willingness to document misconduct by a senior officer at significant personal and professional risk exemplifies the highest standards of law enforcement." Phelps accepted the promotion, stayed in Mercer County, worked to rebuild trust between the department and the community. It was slow going. Years of accumulated grievance didn't disappear because one judge was removed and one deputy promoted. But the tone was different now. The awareness that someone was watching, that consequences were possible. At a community meeting 6 months after the investigation concluded, Phelps spoke publicly for the first time about why he'd leaked the footage. "My grandmother was a civil rights activist. She spent her whole life fighting for justice in this county. When she died, I promised myself I'd carry that forward." His voice was steady. "When I saw what Deputy Harmon did to Mr. Vance, Justice Vance, I knew I had to choose. Keep quiet and protect myself, or speak up and protect what my grandmother believed in." He paused. "I chose to speak up. I'd make the same choice again." Pastor Silas Yates, seated in the front row, nodded slowly. "That's what we need more of," the pastor said. "People willing to make that choice, willing to pay that price." "18 months after becoming Chief Justice, Solomon received a message from Hazel Odom. New referral. JQC, File 24-37. District 14. Statistical anomalies, similar to Mercer. Pattern emerging. He opened the attached file, read the preliminary findings, saw the familiar markers, conviction disparities, sentencing gaps, complaint patterns that went nowhere. Another county, another judge, another system protecting its own. He picked up his phone, dialed Hazel's secure line. "I saw the file." "I thought you would." Her voice was tired but determined. "It's not as severe as Ashworth. Not yet, but the trajectory is clear." "What do you recommend?" "Observation phase, 3 to 6 months. Build the evidence before we move." Solomon thought of the Pinewood Motor Lodge, of courtroom 3, of a parking garage where a deputy had thought there would be no consequences. "No undercover this time. I'm a bit too recognizable now." "We have other options, younger investigators, less profile." "Good." He paused. "Keep me informed. Weekly updates." "Understood." The call ended. Solomon opened the file again, began reading the complaints, familiar patterns, familiar language, familiar failures of a system that bent toward protection rather than accountability. The work continued. 2 years after the Mercer County investigation, Solomon Vance stood at the dedication ceremony for the new Judicial Ethics Center at the University of Georgia School of Law. The building had been funded by a combination of state appropriation and private donation, the latter including a substantial contribution from civil rights organizations that had long advocated for judicial reform. The curriculum would focus on ethical decision-making, implicit bias recognition, and accountability mechanisms. Solomon had been asked to give the keynote address. He spoke for 20 minutes about the history of judicial misconduct in Georgia, about the patterns that had been allowed to persist, about the people who had suffered, the wrongfully convicted, the excessively sentenced, the defendants who'd faced a system designed to work against them from the moment they entered the courtroom. He spoke about his sister. She was convicted of a crime she didn't commit. She served 3 years before the evidence that proved her innocence was finally examined. By the time she was exonerated, something in her had been broken, something that never fully healed. His voice remained steady. He'd told this story before, would tell it again. "She died 6 years ago. I made a promise at her grave that I would work to change the system that failed her, that I would use whatever position I achieved to hold that system accountable." He looked out at the assembled crowd, students, faculty, judges, attorneys, activists, reporters. "I'm still keeping that promise, every day, every case, every decision I make from the bench." He paused. "This building will train the next generation of legal professionals. Some of you will become judges. Some of you will become prosecutors. Some of you will become defense attorneys or public interest lawyers or judicial administrators. Whatever path you choose, remember this: the system doesn't fix itself. It takes people who are willing to speak up, willing to document, willing to fight even when the odds seem impossible. Be those people. The system needs you." He stepped away from the podium. The applause was sustained, genuine, the kind that came from people who understood what had been sacrificed to make this moment possible. That evening, Solomon returned to his chambers at the Supreme Court building. The office was quiet. Staff had gone home. The building hummed with the low frequency of empty spaces, air conditioning, security systems, the ambient presence of an institution that would outlast any individual who served within it. He sat at his desk, opened the drawer where he kept his sister's photograph, looked at her face for a long moment. "I don't know if it's enough," he said quietly. "I don't know if anything will ever be enough." The photograph offered no response. It never did. "But I'm still trying, still fighting, still keeping the promise." He closed the drawer, turned to his computer, opened the secure email system. One new message from Hazel Odom. "District 14 investigation proceeding. Evidence accumulating. Ready when you are, Chief." He typed his response. "I'm ready. Let's continue." Then he turned off his computer, gathered his things, and walked out into the Atlanta night. The work continued. The following morning brought new challenges. A contested election case with implications for voting rights. A death penalty appeal requiring careful constitutional analysis. A judicial conduct complaint from a county Solomon had never visited but knew by reputation. The work of the Chief Justice was endless. Each decision carried weight, Each ruling affected lives. Each moment required the careful balance of legal principle and human consequence. Solomon approached each one the same way, with the yellow legal pad he'd carried for 30 years, the blue ink pens he'd used since law school, the methodical precision that had served him from his first day as a clerk to this moment at the apex of Georgia's judicial system, the habits of someone accustomed to order, to precision, to environments where small details determined large outcomes. At 10:15 a.m., his assistant knocked on the chamber door. "Chief Justice Vance, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." Solomon looked up from the brief he'd been reviewing. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Dunmore, Amelia Dunmore, Caleb's mother, the woman who'd raised 3 children on a mechanic's wages, who'd watched her son arrested for stealing his own truck, who'd waited outside the courthouse every day of the preliminary hearing, praying for justice that had seemed impossible. Send her in." Amelia Dunmore entered the Chief Justice's chambers with the hesitant posture of someone who'd never expected to be in such a room. She was 63 years old, dressed in her Sunday best, holding a small gift-wrapped package in her weathered hands. "Justice Vance, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Please sit." She took the chair across from his desk, looked around the room, the leather-bound law books, the certificates on the wall, the photograph of Solomon's sister that sat prominently on his desk. "I wanted to thank you, in person, for what you did for my boy. Your son was innocent. The evidence proved it. Evidence don't always matter. You know that better than anyone." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I've watched innocent people go to prison my whole life. Watched guilty people walk free. The system don't work the way it's supposed to, most of the time. No, it doesn't. But you made it work. For Caleb. For our family." She held out the wrapped package. "I wanted you to have this." Solomon took it, unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small wooden frame, handmade, containing a photograph. The photograph showed Caleb at his auto shop, standing beside a car he'd just finished repairing. His face was split in a wide smile, the expression of a man who'd gotten his life back. Behind him, visible through the shop's open door, was the black pickup truck that had started everything. "He's doing well," Amelia said. "Back at the shop. Business is better than ever. Folks come from 3 counties now, wanting to support him. The lawsuit settled last month. Not much money, but enough to expand the shop. Hire 2 more mechanics." "I'm glad to hear it." "He named one of the new bays after you. The Vance Bay. Says it's where miracles happen." Solomon looked at the photograph, at the smile on Caleb Dunmore's face, at the simple evidence of a life restored. "This means more than you know," he said quietly. "It means more to us." Amelia's eyes glistened. "My grandmother used to say that justice is a river. Sometimes it flows clear, sometimes it runs muddy. But as long as there are people willing to dig the channel, it keeps moving forward." She stood, smoothed her dress. "You're one of those people, Justice Vance. One of the ones who digs the channel. Don't ever forget that." She left. The chamber door closed behind her. Solomon sat alone with the photograph in his hands, looked at Caleb's smile, at the truck, at the evidence of something that had actually changed because someone had been willing to fight. Then he set the photograph on his desk, beside his sister's picture. 2 faces looking back at him. 2 reminders of why the work mattered. He picked up his legal pad, uncapped his blue pen. The work continued. That night, Solomon dreamed of his sister. They were walking together through a park, not any park he recognized, but a place that felt familiar somehow. Green grass, old oak trees, the sound of children playing somewhere in the distance. "You did good," she said. Her voice was exactly as he remembered it, warm, slightly teasing, the voice of an older sister who'd always known how to push his buttons. "It wasn't enough." "It's never enough. That's how you know you're doing it right." He looked at her. In the dream, she was 23 again, the age she'd been before the arrest, before the conviction, before everything that came after. "I miss you," he said. "I know. I miss you too." She smiled. "But you're doing the work. That's what matters." Sometimes I wonder if it makes a difference. It does. Every case, every decision, every time you choose to fight instead of look away. She stopped walking, turned to face him. "The system didn't break me, Solomon. It hurt me. It took things from me, but it didn't break me. You know why? Why? Because I knew someone would keep fighting, even after I was gone, even when it seemed hopeless." Her eyes held his. "That was you. That's always been you." She reached out, touched his face. "Keep going. Keep fighting. Keep the promise." He woke with tears on his cheeks, and the sunrise streaming through his bedroom window. Charsaw. The final file on Solomon's desk that morning was a JQC referral from District 14. Judge Marcus Whitfield, 19 years on the bench. Statistical anomalies in conviction rates and sentencing patterns. 6 complaints filed over 7 years, all dismissed or pending. A familiar pattern. A new county. The same old struggle. Solomon opened the file, read the documentation, saw the evidence of another judge who'd operated without accountability for nearly 2 decades. His phone buzzed. Text from Hazel Odom. District 14 ready for review. Investigation team assembled. Awaiting authorization. He typed his response. Authorized. Proceed. Then he set down his phone. Looked at the photograph of Caleb Dunmore smiling beside his truck. Looked at his sister's face, frozen in time at 23. 2 reminders. 2 reasons. Solomon Vance, Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, former undercover investigator, keeper of a promise made to a sister who'd never lived to see this day, picked up his yellow legal pad, uncapped his blue pen, and began to write. Solomon Vance's story is not merely the victory of one individual against a corrupt system. It is proof of the power of patience, of meticulous documentation, and of the belief that justice, however delayed, can still be achieved. Silence is complicity. For 6 years, 43 complaints were buried because those who knew the truth chose to look the other way. Only when people dared to stand up, Deputy Phelps with his video footage, Dahlia Sims with her court transcripts, Priscilla Waller with 3 years of accumulated documentation, did the wall begin to crumble. Justice is imperfect, but still worth pursuing. Brick Harmon fled. Fiona Langford received only probation. Ivory Prescott kept her position. There is no fairy tale ending here. But Caleb Dunmore walks free. Ashworth lost his judgeship. A new oversight system was established. That is progress. Slow, painful, but real. Everyone has a role to play. Solomon wielded the power of a Supreme Court justice. But this victory required Pastor Yates filling the courtroom with witnesses, Archer Phelps choosing conscience over career, Amelia Dunmore never stopping her belief in her son's innocence. Become someone who digs the channel for the river of justice. Document everything. Speak up. Vote. Serve on juries when called. Watch your local government, because the system does not fix itself. It needs people willing to act.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.